This here is the brand new 16-inch MacBook Pro with Apple's most powerful chip till date, the M1 Max. This is also the only standard configuration M1 Max MacBook Pro that's available from Apple. All the rest are custom built ones. That means this is the fastest way towards M1 Max MacBook Pro ownership. It is big and improved in almost every way. But what makes this one of the best choices out of any MacBook this year? From a real-world usage perspective, let's find out in this video. Now I'm sure you must have seen a ton of videos by now unboxing these machines. But thankfully, even with the Indian unit, you do not get any stepmotherly treatment in terms of what you get inside the box. Unlike the latest Apple Watch Series 7, which does not come with a fast charging puck inside the box and forces you to buy it separately for 3000 rupees, unlike almost anywhere else in the world. Anyway, inside the box you have the MacBook Pro itself, a massive 140-watt charger and a very nice and strong braided Magsafe cable. You also have the usual regulatory information and the now famous black Apple stickers. Looking at the MacBook itself, if you're coming from the older 16-inch or even the 15-inch MacBook Pro, it is a case of evolution. Sure, it's heavier and thicker, but the benefits that the extra heft brings with it largely nullifies the penalty in terms of portability in most people's minds. Personally, I've been using the super slim MacBook Air M1 for the past year, so it did take a bit of readjustment for me. But it's funny how things are always relative, and if you stop using the MacBook Air for some time, then this huge 16.2-inch screen and the large heavy chassis becomes the new normal for you. I wanted to get the silver this year, swayed as I was by the trend of a lot of people going that way. But honestly, I think the black background of the keyboard is a match made in heaven for the space gray model. The etched MacBook Pro logo on the bottom of the MacBook also looks stunning with the space gray finish. The only other thing that strikes you as new in the keyboard and trackpad area is the omission of the touch bar and the black but rounded Touch ID sensor. Again, since I've been using the MacBook Air for the past year, this is not something that has affected me in any way. And although I've never minded the touch bar itself, maybe except the lack of physical escape key on the early models. And that trackpad on the 16-incher remains as huge as ever, able to fit an iPhone 13 Pro Max lengthwise inside it. A lot of hue and cry has been made about the return of the ports and how this will end the dongle life. Well, frankly speaking, it does nothing for me in terms of reducing the number of dongles needed. Until we get at least a single USB-A port, the ton of legacy devices that we use will always need a dongle. And also a lot has happened since Apple first removed the ports in 2016. So most users have adapted to this reality, and so have manufacturers. For example, my large 32-inch external display is connected via a Thunderbolt dock that uses the Thunderbolt port on any MacBook I use it with. Yes, when connecting to my TV to watch content from the MacBook, the built-in HDMI port is a godsend. Similarly, my Nikon Z6 camera uses XQD cards that come with a reader that still needs a dongle to convert from USB Type A to Type C. I still have uses for an SD card reader such as the GoPros and audio recorders, so its presence is certainly welcome. And Magsafe. I remember the time with my 2012 Retina 13-inch MacBook Pro when I had a blown power adapter due to a power surge on two separate occasions. Since that MacBook could only be charged via Magsafe, it rendered the MacBook useless until a new pricey adapter could be bought. So I was happier to learn that the USB Type-C charging would still work on the new MacBook Pros than the return of Magsafe itself. It's great to have that fast charging capability with the huge 140-watt adapter, especially when using the machine in laptop form. But frankly, my CalDigit TS3 Plus Thunderbolt dock will continue charging this new MacBook Pro when connected to the external display, albeit at a maximum of 87 watts. So overall, the return of the ports are corrections rather than revolution when it comes to MacBooks. They are very welcome, but they're not the main reasons to buy one of these. The display, however, may well be one of the biggest reasons you should upgrade to the new MacBook Pros. Apple really has left no stone unturned here this time. I felt sheer delight when listening to the keynote and discovering that not only were we going to get the mini LED screens for near OLED level blacks and super bright HDR content, but we would have ProMotion on the Mac for the first time. That means for the first time in history, it's possible to have an entire Apple ecosystem with a phone, a tablet and a laptop, all with 120Hz refresh rate displays. The display is beautiful to look at, and the slim bezels are really uplifting in terms of the design. Even the notch has not been a hindrance in any way or form. If the cost of keeping the form factor small is having a notch display, then so be it. Perhaps the only time the notch eats into screen real estate is if you are a power user and have lots of icons on the menu bar. Then the icons towards the center of the screen will disappear depending on what app you're in. That's because some apps have larger menus that take up more space on the left side compared to others that don't. Apart from this, the notch is not even noticeable most of the time, and videos never go into the area around the notch anyway. Bear in mind that many apps have not been updated yet to take benefit of the ProMotion display on the new Macs. As a result, even Safari does not seem as smooth as it can be with the high refresh rate. What does stand out is the sublime quality of the screen. Everything is so crisp and sharp that you just don't want to use an external display with this computer. And that's where the 16.2-inch screen of the 16-inch MacBook Pro really shines. It genuinely affords you enough space to work with on any app of your choosing. Editing videos and photos are a joy on this laptop. Also, working with spreadsheets and browsing text-heavy websites or even colorful photographic websites is a mesmerizing experience. Now, when it comes to performance, this is the biggest area of improvement when it comes to graphics-intensive work. Also, this is arguably more important than any other aspect of the new laptops. Here are the benchmarks on screen for the M1, the M1 Pro and the M1 Max. Whilst I wouldn't suggest reading too much into this, but just focus on two aspects. See how the CPU benchmarks like Geekbench 5 and Cinebench R23 scores are identical for all three for single core, but scale up according to the number of cores for the multi-core scores. But more importantly, look at the iGPU benchmark in orange. See how little separates the M1 and M1 Pro chips, but also how the M1 Max completely blows them both out of the water and more than doubles up on their performance. This is what makes this the most suitable chip for graphics and video work. The key thing to remember here is in the names of the processors. They're all M1 chips, just with added CPU and GPU cores, besides other improvements such as the memory bandwidth and dedicated encoders for certain tasks. What that means is that the single core scores are the same, and all of these are based on the same 5nm A14 cores that they use as a basis. What this also means is that performance in everyday tasks is not wildly different. I do see improvements in burst performance such as when opening apps, etc., but this can be accounted to the extra RAM in this machine. In fact, Anand Tech in their deep dive article on the M1 Max and Pro chips sum it up very well. They say that the M1 Max chip is essentially a very powerful GPU with a CPU built around it, rather than the other way around. But this is good news. This means that everyone can choose an M1 based system according to what they plan on doing with it. It also means that if you don't fancy carrying around a large 16-inch laptop, you will get the same performance from a featherweight, fanless MacBook Air for all but the most demanding apps or when doing heavy multitasking. Video editing gives us a good basis for comparison as it taxes the systems in more ways than one. First of all, the M1 Max can also stutter. If you add a clip and immediately start editing it without first giving it a chance to render. But it's still much better than the basic M1. We're talking about a single 8-bit 4K H.264 timeline in Final Cut Pro. Everything is simple and native here. So if someone was to tell you that even the M1 Max is infallible, then it's not. It's a scaled up M1 and that is what should be expected. However, the extra resources do mean a much smoother editing experience, and that is what matters to me more than the final export time, which is also halved when compared to the vanilla M1. Whilst on this topic, let me also add that if you're on the fence between 16, 32 or 64 GB of RAM, then even with unified memory, the more RAM you have, the better. Although how everyone uses their computer will be different, I have a simple test here that will show you how one rogue plugin will nearly use up all the system RAM in this 32GB MacBook Pro M1 Max and will bring the 8GB M1 MacBook Air to its knees and will make it basically unusable whilst the render process is on. Now do note here that this is just with this plugin, and there are ways to manage this by turning off the background render, for instance. But the idea here is to show how the extra RAM means you will still be able to work in the background whilst the render completes. And it also shows how the extra CPU and GPU cores help in reducing the overall render time. This is a plugin by Leno FX for Final Cut Pro. It's called Maps 2.0 and it provides a simple map animation for video projects. There are other ways to achieve such animations in Motion and Adobe After Effects or by using keyframes inside Final Cut Pro, but having such a simple built-in solution is a real time saver. Problem is, even though it's said to be optimized for Apple Silicon, it uses up tons and tons of RAM. When you first add a map to your timeline, it will completely overwhelm system resources. On the M1 Max, it takes around 25 seconds for the background render. On the M1 MacBook Air, it takes around 1 minute and 10 seconds. Every time you make a change on the map, the same render times are needed. So a better way to use it is to have background render off and then let it render once everything completes. And then it will only take a total of 25 seconds on the Max and 1 minute and 10 seconds on the M1 in total. But anyway, the point is the M1 Max remains completely usable during these 25 seconds. This is the only time I've seen it dip into the swap memory usage, especially if you have a lot of other apps running in the background. The M1 MacBook Air crawls to a halt. Videos in the background browsers will stutter and stop playing, and in fact even changing between apps is virtually impossible. If you look at the RAM usage with both these MacBooks, you can see that the M1 MacBook Air with 8GB of RAM almost never has any free memory. It starts swapping as soon as a few apps are open. With the 32GB MacBook Pro, the headroom is much higher, so you can carry on working and it will have at least 8 to 10 GB of RAM free, if not more, at any given point of time. I've only seen it dip into the swap file usage a couple of times, and that too when using the previously mentioned Rogue plugin for Final Cut Pro. So I'd highly suggest getting at least 32GB of RAM with these machines if you're spending so much. It will ensure that you will almost never have to dip into swap file usage. During the week I've had the M1 Max 16-inch MacBook Pro, I've never heard the fans. It remains nice and cool and renders everything silently. If you feel the bottom of the MacBook Pro, it is barely warm to the touch even after intensive use. The battery life is excellent even on this machine. I charged it to 100% on Monday at around 4 PM and then was able to use it for almost 4 hours of on-screen time for the next 3.5 days. That means 12 hours of screen on time, which included web browsing, watching movies and even some Final Cut Pro editing. By Thursday, the battery was down to 11%. Using the 140-watt charger and Magsafe, the fast charging feature brought this up to 46% in just 20 minutes. That's a 35% charge in 20 minutes. In 30 minutes, it got charged to 64%, meaning a 53% charge, and 100% charging took around 1 hour and 10 minutes. Really convenient and impressive. Now, although the M1 Pro powered 16-incher may last longer, but battery life is not a concern even on the M1 Max 16-inch, and the fast charging takes the pain out when juicing it back up. So for the past year, I've been using this MacBook Air to edit all my videos and do all other computer tasks. I faced bottlenecks in my video editing work because of the limited GPU power and the lack of RAM. Both of those got fixed by the M1 Max. Sure, the M1 Pro can also do that, but it can't halve the export times of the M1 like the M1 Max can. And the only way to get 32GB of RAM with the M1 Pro is via a customized model that will take at least 5 to 6 weeks to arrive. So in my opinion, with its thermally efficient chassis, the M1 Max standard configuration model is the top choice amongst any MacBook north of 2 lakh rupees if you can live with the large size. This also means that if you're currently using an M1 MacBook Air or Pro 13-inch and are happy with their performance, or if the aforementioned improvements are of no consequence to you, then there is no reason you can't hold on to them for a while longer. In fact, enjoy that portability and efficiency that you will only get with those machines. Like with the rest of the system, Wi-Fi performance seems more robust than my other devices, especially the MacBook Air. Although the flaky Wi-Fi connections that the Air originally had at the time of launch of the M1 has long since been fixed, but the signal strength and distance that the bigger MacBook Pro 16-inch can work with compared to this is noticeably better. It's a continuation of the theme of the performance. Having extra of everything makes for a smoother experience. Now, in terms of whether you should buy one, it depends. Most reviewers will tell you that for most people, the world's best-selling 13-inch notebook computer, the MacBook Air, is more than enough. And they'd be right. With the M1 chip, if you're buying a general usage computer, then any version of the MacBook Air is serious value for money. The question now is whether you should spend almost twice as much, at least, to enter the zone of the new 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros. Look at it this way. Analyze your usage of your current or intended MacBook. If you work with anything that requires a lot of memory or GPU power, then it's an easy decision when it comes to the new MacBook Pros, especially when you combine the performance improvements with the hardware changes. Not only will you get less bottlenecks when it comes to performance, but you will also get more ports, nicer screen, and the new design language. Now, about which one you should buy. So for general usage, which means web browsing, emailing, working with documents, spreadsheets, general office work, light photo and video editing, or either of those for non-critical workloads, meaning your earning does not entirely depend on them, the MacBook Air remains the MacBook of choice. If you intend on keeping it for longer, do spec it up to 16 GB RAM and at least 512 GB storage. That way you will have at least a few years headroom and can also do a reasonable level of more resource intensive tasks like graphic design and 3D modeling. If you want all of the same with just a teeny weeny bit more of performance and no throttling when under load because of the fans, then the same can be applied to the MacBook Pro 13-inch. But here you have to be careful, especially if you're speccing it up, as it will get close to the base model 14-inch, which is a very comprehensive update of the MacBook Pro line. Now, if you're going for the standard models of the 13-inch MacBook Pro with just 8 GB of RAM, it's probably better to stick to the Air and save some money, as the lack of RAM will pose as a larger bottleneck than the lack of active cooling. So the only model I can recommend amongst the 13-inch MacBook Pro is the 512 GB storage version with 16 GB of RAM. This makes it around 32,000 rupees less than a similar spec 14-inch base model MacBook Pro. So if the budget is so tight, this one will not disappoint for the majority of users. But at the cost of confusing you even more, I wonder if it's worth spending twice as much on this when a base model MacBook Air with nearly identical specs and perhaps 80% of the performance is going for such tempting prices these days and will have no waiting time to pick one up. Now the 14-inch MacBook Pro. Don't make the mistake that many have made on YouTube. The idea of combining the portability of a MacBook Air with the power from the MacBook Pro 16-inch is a pipe dream for many tech enthusiasts. But remember the laws of physics. Get the M1 Pro processor with the 14-inch and you will have plenty of cooling and battery life. The fans will never be audible and you will still benefit from the hardware upgrades. The 1TB model with 16 GB RAM or perhaps upgraded to 32 GB RAM represents the best bang for your buck in this case. However, if the purchase decision is just based on the hardware improvements, then even the base model will work well. In fact, that can be the default choice for anyone considering the 13-inch MacBook Pro, budget allowing. I just think that when spending 2 lakhs or over in 2021 on a laptop, a 1TB hard drive is a minimum, especially if you do any sort of creative work with it. The 16-inch is in a class of its own. Whilst the other 3 MacBooks are fairly close in terms of screen size and dimensions, the 16-inch is targeted at a completely different user group. You will most likely want one and not be put off by its size. Personally, I wanted 32 GB of RAM as a minimum and 1 TB of storage. Also, I wanted the M1 Max processor, as that is the only one that cuts render and export times for video work by more than half. The M1 Pro in this area only offers incremental upgrades over the vanilla M1. Also, currently there is a real shortage of these machines, so the idea of a standard model was very appealing to me with no waiting time. Now, you will obviously have to look at your own use case scenario, but at this price level, I would highly encourage getting at least 32 GB of RAM and 1 TB of storage. If you choose the M1 Pro with this configuration, the price difference between the standard M1 Max and it will only be around 30,000 rupees, and you may also get some cashback on the standard model, reducing this gap even further. Also, you would need to wait at least 5 or 6 weeks for the machine if you custom built it to arrive. So bear all this in mind when making a decision. My personal take on this is that when spending this much on a laptop, it makes sense to get the specs you want rather than compromising and still spending a lot and ending up with a less than ideal machine. Sure, they can all do the tasks you throw at them, but that's not the point. Even a base M1 MacBook Air will do most tasks. But if you try to drive a nail into a wall with a set of pliers instead of a hammer, it will soon get frustrating. It's the same here. Get the right tool for the job, because that's what they really are. And in fact, these are very focused and niche tools for pros that will know how to get the value out of them. Hope this video helped you to some extent, and thanks for sticking till the end. I will see you in the next one.